coffee here. Let's get this over with. This is a long one. Let's pray this turns out okay. Totally not just doing this to boost watch time hours. No, not at all. Ever since I started toying with the idea of doing reviews, this movie was among one of the first that I knew I'd have a sizable chunk of things to talk about. It's one of the most divisive movies for me personally, since I think I have a decent enough grasp with how I want to edit my stuff. I wanted to jump right into this behemoth of a movie. There's so much that's wrong with it, but at the same time, like, some of those errors are things that I also really enjoy about it too. I know, it doesn't make sense. As a baseline, I'm not saying that this is a great movie, not by a long shot. Despite me really wanting to talk about this movie for a while, almost every time I tried hyping myself up for it, I would basically just put it off. This is a discussion on the Ultimate Edition, or whatever the hell that means. It adds like an extra 30 minutes, most of which is just to add some extra context and backstory on things we didn't see in the theatrical version. I didn't think it'd be fair to do this on the original cut, because the added backstory on things does help with some of the minor subplots in the movie. It's honestly not that big of a deal. I don't think it improves the movie dramatically. Actually, in my case, it actually might have been a hindrance. We'll get to that. But Batman, awesome. Superman, okay. Batman vs. Superman. Dude, when this came out in 2016, I thought this was going to be fucking sick. I was like 17, about to graduate high school, and after pretty much growing up on the plucky vibes of Marvel movies, to me the darker tone contrasting that with DC was for me pretty refreshing back then. Hating on this movie is nothing new. I don't even want to count how many trash posts on this movie there are on YouTube. This movie has soured badly. It's like milk left out in the fridge for the weekend. Even after that extended cut came out, my impression was that it helped the movie, but not tremendously. It did help flesh out some of the plot points a little better, and they doubled down more on the gratuity of the violence, which pushed it up for an R rating. So right now, before diving in, I remember very much liking this movie when it came out. My brother too, but I know there's, well, it's just so much. I've seen so many bad reviews on this movie. But I gathered a few thoughts from some people to maybe generate an overall feel before going in, and so far it's pretty mixed. In my understanding, it definitely feels like a shared complaint has been with the runtime and pacing for this movie, which I knew from the start is something which I'd have an issue with as well. Okay, alright, pull up your sleeves. Let's tackle what was the biggest cage match back in 2016, and arguably one of the biggest disappointments in superhero films. Oh, let me get some water first. It starts off with a very brief overview of Batman's origin story as a kid, which I mean, even if you're not a big fan of superheroes, I think most people already get the idea. It doesn't add anything new to that story. It would have made sense if this was included in order to shed some light on a new perspective with this motivation, but it's literally all the same. Okay, sure, in this one he rises up from the cave with the visual sequence of the bats levitate him like a UFO tractor beam or whatever. It looks cool. I get what it's supposed to represent. You're gonna hear I get a lot. But for the rest of the movie that follows, I found that to really stick out because there's not a single other symbolic imagery like scene where what we're watching is not supposed to be taken literally. There's a lot of parallels and ham-fisted symbolism in this movie. I'm very aware. Superman as our space Jesus, I get it. Another one. But that's all presented literally. It's a nitpick or whatever, I know, but some of these issues I have stem from these little harmless scenes like this and progressively escalate to a point where it becomes a detriment to the movie later on. But again, it looks cool. I don't really get the 4:3 aspect ratio though. I've never understood Snyder's fascination with that. Film the movie however you want, I guess it's okay. I watched this on HBO Max for the review. Apparently it's like that to include the aspect ratio for the IMAX setting. I just kind of found that distracting. Also, if that's the case, then why is the one shot of Bruce Wayne coming out of the helicopter filmed in IMAX, but not the fucking Carnage recap in the fallout from Man of Steel? Like, that happens right after. Already not even 3 minutes into the movie. My god. Yeah, strap in. First title card drop. Mankind is introduced to the Superman. For me, I love how they phrase that chapter card to be like he's this unstoppable force of nature, because he is. See, I can nitpick on positives that like Bruce Wayne speeds through Metropolis to get to one of his buildings, which, okay, here's another one. Let's assume he flew in from Gotham, right? Surely you'd think that by that time, the people in his office would have evacuated because of the presence of the giant alien ship that's right outside their window. If that was Jack's call, then he fucked up big time. But I did like the attention to detail here where the vibration from the laser beam terraforming thing or whatever is incorporated with the soundtrack in the background. I love when they play around with sound like that. And man, I haven't seen Man of Steel in quite a while. I'll definitely have to do a video on that in the future. But the recap in this movie just reminded me of the crazy amount of destruction during the end of that fight between Superman and Zod. It's fucking nuts. It's so excessive. I've always wondered if that was intentional from the beginning. Although a part of me has always thought it'd be kind of funny that, okay, if you think back during the release of other comic book movies at the time, if maybe we just gotten to the point of so much destruction in the third act of these fights that it just built up to this breaking point of going overboard with the idea. Like, we just became numb to it. Also, kind of a coincidence that both this and Marvel Civil War came out in the same year, and they both addressed that issue on the toll of collateral damage from these superhero fights. And just the year before, we got Age of Ultron, which also had that level of destruction too. It's like poetry, it rhymes. Okay, am I wrong for making this comparison? Because surely someone has thought this. This whole set piece is supposed to be like this universe's 9/11. I mean that literally. When we get that first shot of Bruce Wayne and the other pedestrians staring up at the alien ship thing for the first time, we see a shot from their perspective, and then another plane comes in, crashes into it, and creates that shockwave. Like, come on, that's a little on the nose. We get it. It's supposed to be a reflection piece between their world and ours, and I guess they just really wanted to hammer in that idea Christopher Nolan had in grounding this to be as realistic as it could. If these kind of people existed, because I mean, that's what I want when I escape into my superhero movies. Make it feel like I never left. I'll be right at home. However, as it stands, I do think this was honestly a really great way to incorporate Batman into Superman's universe. We see from his perspective how, like everyone else in Metropolis, is going to feel about Superman for the rest of the movie going forward. It's a lot better than if they cut that whole sequence out and Bruce had only mentioned how he was there and saw everything secondhand at the dinner party later on. It does its job showing how powerless people are with a threat like Superman in their world. After that, we get a scene introducing how kryptonite in this movie is harnessed from Earth, which, man, I am nitpicking here, but I've seen this several times, right? I just noticed that when those guys retrieve the pod, it's not a piece from the ship, but it's growing from Earth itself. I guess in this universe, sure, there's kryptonite on Earth. Although I did see a Reddit post where someone was justifying that, saying that it was created from the terraforming process that hadn't finished. Which, that theory makes sense, but I don't think that was communicated well at all in this movie. I never even heard of that theory until now, or even thought of it. I've been trying to piece it together, but why would kryptonite be on the surface of the planet when they said how in Man of Steel it's supposed to basically change the structure of Earth from the inside out? Also, why the fuck would Zod want to nerf his own species like that? They were the dominant life form on Earth by that point. Okay, you know what, I'm saving that for another time. We gotta keep going. Jimmy Olsen is CIA now. Nice. I wonder how that'll play into the rest. Oh, he's dead. No, never mind. Yeah, that had to be one of the quickest intros and death of a comic book character in a movie, like, literally ever. Speaking of death, Superman gets his first on-screen kill in this movie too. You can't honestly tell me that he's not fucking dead. He literally moves faster than a bullet. If the whiplash didn't kill him, then surely crashing through 5 or 8 levels of hardened clay walls would do the trick. First Batman scene, I love it. You're gonna notice kind of a disproportionate amount of my negatives when it comes to Batman and Superman scenes, but really almost every scene with Batman here, I have very little to harp on. Say what you will about the darker tone for this movie and whether it's appropriate or not, which I'll get into later in the video, but for Batman, it absolutely works. Some of my favorite Batman scenes of all time come from this movie, and his introduction was great. Him holed up in the corner of the room was kind of funny, but also effectively unsettling from that cop's perspective. And then he scuttled away like a rat, which was also kind of humorous. But man, that cop has shit aim. He's literally in the same room, dude. You have it shotgun. I don't know if cops are issued spread shots. Maybe it was only slugs. Okay, that Batman branding business. I'm actually on the side where I was okay with it. Batman killing people, yeah, I understand. Fundamentally, that goes against his character. I get it, but we've had iterations of his character where he has killed people before, so I don't see why we couldn't have the same for this version too. I never felt it was baseless. After all the years that's implied that he's been working in the suit, it would make sense to have that kind of a change in his tactic. Yes, the non-kill rule is a part of his fundamentals to keep from crossing over the edge, but for an older, more bitter and brutal version of Bruce Wayne here, and this is post Jason Todd, that for the Snyderverse, I think it felt appropriate. And for me, I did interpret that to be part of his arc by the end of the movie as well. This is the only movie where we ever see this Batman kill as a matter of fact as he does here. And I mean, for a human trafficker too, like murder is wrong, sure, but I mean, come on, I get it. Let's assume he's not branding every jaywalker. I'm hoping there's a bit of a kind of a criteria he bases his branding method on. Hopefully, maybe he has just really gone off that far. Finally, our first scene with Lois and Clark 2, which is cute. It sets up a very noticeable issue on Superman saving Lois, wherever she is, especially if she's halfway across the planet. Like, people are going to draw conclusions if they haven't already. Finally, we've arrived at Lex. Oh.
Ahoy, ahoy! I did not know you were here.
If I could effectively draw my little character cracking his knuckles, I would. His first introduction, I remember just reaffirming everyone's concerns when Jesse Eisenberg was first announced as Lex Luthor. In general, yes, I'll give you that he does not quite capture the same presence and power that we associate that character with. I mean, holy shit, he has hair. Okay, the hair's not the problem here. If anything, I think you can make a case that he has more of that sense of authority after he loses his hair by the end of the movie. It's a very on-the-nose transformation of this iteration of Lex from being this Zuckerberg or Elon Musk-like billionaire to more of a criminal mastermind. He's definitely the biggest oddball of this movie, and I think one of the biggest reasons he is the way he is contributes to Snyder's hard-on for making this as real to our world as possible. So I guess a Lex character would be something more along the lines of this rich, quirky, kind of excessively paranoid CEO, but you know, I really do find the performance really grating. There's not a whole lot of Lex in this movie, but with his dialogue, especially during that party scene, just him especially, I just want him to shut the hell up. You know what this version reminds me of most? Woody Allen, just constantly talking and rambling on about shit, and it's like, I get it. Cut. End the scene, please. And then again, you know, maybe I shouldn't be one to talk, I'm pretty rambly. The only defense I think I have for this character is that initial motivation. That I totally got behind, and of course he's supposed to be a contrast to Bruce Wayne with Alfred's little monologue about how feeling powerless turns good men cruel. That's an angle I could get behind. I like that. Although, I don't think Lex was a very good person to begin with. He's more of a creep, if anything. And now, it's small, but compared to the additions so far, it was nice for added context. Clark is shown to do some investigating as a journalist, finally. He attempts to interview the witness from the earlier court scene and stumbles across hearing about the influence of Batman on Gotham. And I like the added dialogue with the guy outside. He remembers a time when Batman wasn't so bitter and cruel, but now it's a much different era. A civilian recognizing the change to his character like that was nice. And it's not just us who take notice of that. So Clark has requested specifically him to cover that charity party or whatever with Lex there. That's supposed to imply that Lex knew Clark was Superman, right? If that's the case, that already raises a couple questions. Like, you know, if you're looking to stop these metahuman threats, then you'd want to call them out and make them a target if you can. Lex wasn't aware of the recreation process at that point as of yet. I've always found it kind of funny and ironic with superhero villains that pretty much most of the time from the start, they've got all the cards in their hands, and they always wait until it's too late to play them. I'm just saying, if Snyder wanted to make this super realistic and all, I don't think anybody with that amount of information would really just keep it to themselves. This isn't the Joker and Batman dynamic, although I think that may have been what they were implying, except the Joker enjoys the game of cat and mouse because he's fucked in the head, whereas in this version of Lex, he's not devious to that extent. Honestly, what is Lex's main motivation? Unless I'm completely missing something here. There's nothing that's implied him beyond really just wanting to keep the threat of a Superman in check. I've heard as a joke before, but he is kind of the real protagonist in this movie. You know what? They may be right. I could get behind that. Like, of course you have to have some deterrent. Why wouldn't you stop that? Like, he could literally destroy the planet at any time. God, I fucking hate Lex's speech in that party. I've cringed every time I've watched it. Anyways, the first exchange between Clark and Wayne I actually liked though, especially on Batman's end. Never took Ben Affleck as a great Bruce Wayne, but I like the subtle change in tone when he first goes on about giving a statement to the planet into making little jabs on them praising Superman too. At that point, honestly, with Bruce's detective skills, I wouldn't be surprised if he already picked up on Clark being Superman. I really doubt a pair of glasses is enough to throw him off like it does for everyone else. If not, then he needs that greatest detective in the world title needs to be revoked. Absolutely. Following the charity scene, we finally get our first little sequence block of the Superman Jesus visuals. Ah, man. They look aesthetically pleasing. I can't knock that. And this is a Snyder alternate universe, pretty much reflecting ours as hard as possible. I get it. It makes sense. All this stuff, though, is not really what I'd want in a superhero movie, for me at least. Marvel's Civil War, which came out the same year as this, I think honestly did this social commentary much better in comparison. For one, it's not beaten in your head about the ethics of superheroes. They're symbols, yes, but they're meant to inspire and motivate us. I don't see why we have to think about real-world politics and ethics when I'm just trying to see my old action figures beat the crap out of bad guys. I don't think that's too much to ask. And honestly, for me too, the TV series on Amazon, The Boys, also does a better job weaving those themes into its story as well, because in Batman v Superman, all that commentary feels like fluff to me. Hell, I don't care much much for Snyder's Watchmen movie, but even that did a better job at it too. The key difference with this is that this is just not entertaining. I'm trying to finish my evening off watching a movie. Don't make me contemplate whether liking Superman makes me a bad person or not. A lot of this sounds like I have a bias against Superman. I don't. I mean, I do find his character less compelling than Batman by a long shot, and I've always loved Henry Cavill's interpretation of the character. He's personally my favorite. What I am not a fan of is the way he's written, especially his dialogue. We're gonna get to that. Fuck, I hate the way he talks. And this leads into another great added scene where Clark calls home to his mom for support. That's sweet. It's a good scene. It does its job. In the theatrical cut, he just throws his napkin away in front of the TV while he's watching that special about Superman. More humanity than never hurts, especially for a guy that can brush off bullets like Nerf darts. Speaking of bullets, okay, this bullet stuff. If you remember, Lois is following the lead after extracting one of the rounds from that meeting in the Africa scene, which, I mean, I could have talked about this earlier, but I think it's incredibly stupid that Lex, or I don't know, it's really the writers here, think that it's compelling enough evidence to suggest that the dead bodies riddled with this prototype round came from Superman, even though they've never seen him use a gun. I mean, why would he? Everybody knows the extent of what he can do. The whole subplot just felt like such an afterthought. It's just more padding we don't need. It's just take all that out. I skipped through most of that kind of stuff on my rewatch. It doesn't add anything. It's supposed to make people hate Superman more, but what's the point when Lex already had a plan in place to make people really hate him? Like, what was that just build-up? Was that just a riot? I don't know. Fuck it. There's no point. There's no point. I like in the scene where Bruce confronts Diana that they're playing Waltz Number 2 by Dmitri Shostakovich. Do you remember Eyes Wide Shut? I do. Okay, what is this, like 20 minutes in? God, I've never done a deep dive in a movie before like this. My goodness. Does this suck out most of the enjoyment I had with this movie? Which, it's honestly a good thing. It's kind of a reality check now, because, Jesus, the pacing in this movie is god-awful. It is so painfully slow. I know this is the extended cut, but I've already talked about how the length of movies don't matter as much if it's just entertaining, and an hour in, I mean, so usually movies are constructed between A and B plots, which are like the sub-stories usually, but nothing really ties you along because you're watching these characters learn information that we as an audience are already aware of. So that doesn't leave us much besides what everybody watches this for, which is the big fight, and that doesn't happen until like 2.5 hours into the goddamn movie. Oh god, the nightmare scene. Man, what a waste. You know, that Injustice plotline, I think is really neat. I like the version from the games, but man, if it had ever gone through in the Snyderverse, I'm very curious as to how that would have been approached. Because Injustice takes place in an alternate reality of theirs, presumably, so would we have gotten this as part of another sub-story to this main one? So many questions, and it's all pointless now. It's gone. That'll never happen. I sincerely doubt it will. I don't think projecting Superman as a villain would necessarily do well with the general audience anyways, and certainly not with Henry Cavill Superman. He's too sweet. I wouldn't want that for him either. And it is certainly jarring seeing Batman wield a gun finally on screen. It doesn't work. It's weird. The man himself is a weapon. That's just going overboard. The long one-shot take of Batman taking down all those Superman goons or henchmen, whatever they are, the soldiers, was very satisfying though. I like the way that was shot. This is nitpicky, but honestly, if the world is already going to shit, what's the point in keeping the mask on, Bruce? I don't think anybody would really care to learn that you're Batman. Whatever. It's funny. Okay. I'm okay with Batman killing, but not with a gun. That feels like a bit too much to me. I think also I was just happy to see some action into an hour of this comic book movie. At least something happened. You know what? This isn't really a comic book movie. This is a really boring drama with people that wear costumes from time to time. Like 90% of this is that. I've always thought that the Flash coming back in time to warn Bruce was so stupid. Not in the scene itself, it's just compared with everything else leading up to then, it feels so jarring and ham-fisted to have such an extreme scene like this in the middle of basically what's been like filler social commentary until now. Yeah, spell it out how Superman is evil, who could have guessed? That basically confirmed all your suspicions. He does go after the kryptonite immediately after that scene, which was great. I'll get into that. This is where it started to pick up a lot more for me. Okay, think about it, because if you're writing this, right, like I just imagine they just plop the Flash scene in there because they're like, oh crap, we need to get Batman to go after the kryptonite. How do we do this? How does he get the kryptonite suit and all this crap? He just has a fucking vision scene, and then Flash comes out from the past, and then it affects the timeline, and blah, 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 blah. Shut up. But that chase scene to retrieve the kryptonite was so fucking cool. It was my favorite Batmobile chase for the longest time, until the Batman came out, which that won me over. And Batfleck still has my favorite Batmobile design though. The Arkham Knight is a close second. Is there a point to address the carnage of the scene? Maybe. It's the first case where we actually see Batman kill anyone intentionally. The nightmare scene doesn't count. That was a dream. I don't care. He kills. He's an angry bat. I'm not gonna cry for the criminals here. But the whole thing ends with Superman intervening. So I have to ask, did he know what Batman was after? And if he did, and knew who was in possession of it, like, I would think it'd be wise to remove that liability altogether. Which is worse, Batman or LexCorp having possession of the only thing that can kill you? And that dialogue exchange is so cheesy and unnecessarily edgy and dark. When I saw this younger, I was like, oh, that's so cool, but for me now, it's a little cringe. It makes sense coming from Batman, like, that's his whole deal, but hearing Superman just be so mean and cutthroat like that, that's a great scene where if I gave you the transcript of that exchange and asked you to tell me which is Batman or Superman, I don't think you could tell the difference. Not if you hadn't seen this before, but okay, I can maybe forgive that. By this point, if you're still on board with everything, you kind of just have to abandon any hope of seeing your favorite characters come to life. This isn't your childhood. This is Snyder's world where everyone is dark and broody like Batman, and everybody dies. No, wait, that's after. Speaking of dying, that court hearing with Wallace and Superman, this is where everything is supposed to fall in place in Lex Luthor's plan. The big setup to finally turn the people against Superman. Where do we start? Let's start with Wallace. I haven't talked about him until this point, mostly because he doesn't really serve much of a purpose besides being bait, but I wanted to turn that into a little bit of a discussion before his big send-off. I felt his character had a lot of potential. I think all of my padding complaints with the commentary could have been maybe more interestingly presented through him. This is all a what if, of course, and just my thoughts, but especially given that Superman's sacrifice by the end is the real kicker to turn people over more to his side, I think. What if instead we had that shown through a character arc, that being Wallace? And I'm not just saying by keeping him alive, I also mean with more scenes before the second act where we kind of see that transformation. Having a character like him that captures everyone's fear and anger on Superman, to have him turn to support Superman by the end of the movie would have been really effective. Maybe being saved by Superman directly, I thought that could have been a more compelling angle than the version that we got. Also, what the fuck, dude? He sends his assistant in the courtroom and Lex knows she's going to die. Right? I never understood that. There's this very subtle implication of Lex having some kind of a connection with this girl, her name Mercy Graves. And actually, I had no idea. Seriously, she's actually a character in the comics. In fact, her first introduction, she was revealed to be an Amazonian undercover, which is pretty crazy. Imagine if that was here. Actually, you know, that still might be the case. Who knows? Maybe that's why he left her in there, because, I mean, surely she would have been in on it. She was there when Lex gave Wallace the wheelchair in his apartment. Surely she didn't just think he was being generous. I'm probably putting more thought to this than I should. Okay, so at this point, I kind of stopped writing stuff scene for scene, and I just started taking bullet point notes. Most of it is rambly, or there's just points I wanted to mention but not really flesh out, so I'm flashing forward a bit. A lot of this I wrote while I was a little messed up, but I think they're very telling. I wish they could have explained how Luthor knew that Superman couldn't see lead. How the fuck did Lex know to go to the Kryptonian ship? How did Lex learn 100,000 worlds worth of information in one sitting? Lex harps on metahumans, but I think he's one himself. He's a closeted metahuman. He's trying to take it out on others. So falls the House of Wayne. And I just wrote that because I guess I thought that was funny. Why the fuck is Superman on a mountain? How did Lex know that Batman would shine his light to bait Superman? Again, all of that, I just did it. I wrote it down, but I was like, what's the point? It doesn't matter. All of it is just stupid. These are just like plot holes or complaints or nitpicks that it's like, there's not even worth getting into. Oh, in this scene.
I'll take you in without breaking you, which is more than you deserve.
Yeah, that's the happy hero that I love. Who needs Batman? Superman's the edgy one now. Jesus. Robert Pattinson is Superman. Come on, they should do that someday, where they have the same actor as Batman play as Superman in another movie too. They could get real wild with it. Make it like so that they're basically the same person, and they do a crossover with some time-dimensional rift, and then there's this like existential relationship happening where both halves of the same person come together to defeat the big villain. Fuck, I'm so messed up. I'm sorry, I had to for the rest of this movie. I think I'm just a glutton for pain, because even while I actually have some sick sense of enjoyment from this movie, mostly from the main fight, I just hate how much bullshit you have to sit through. I'm like, please get on with it. This is really like trying to watch a boxing match on cable. You sit through so much just to get to a fight that may or may not last your money's worth. It's either over too soon or drags on for way too long in clinching rounds. In this case, it's too soon, and then the other fight with the cave troll, that lasts an eternity, because that's what we came here for. That's the fight that I want.
God takes sides.
No,
I don't think no man in the sky intervened with a boy to deliver me from death.
Oh my god, shut the fuck up already. This rambling, literally, this is Woody Allen if he was the villain in a comic book movie. What's ironic too is that I actually prefer Superman Returns over this when it comes to just the stuff between action scenes. It's actually in a really intimate perspective between Clark and Lois. I personally really enjoyed that dynamic, and you know, he is really good in it too. I think he's hilarious. Alright, let's get back on track. I'm burning out here. So, the motivation to finally get these two to fight each other is whatever. It gets them where they need to. And finally, we get to the damn cage match, and I have a couple complaints about it. Obviously, the length of it is the big one. This movie is over 3 hours long. Okay, 2.5 if you're watching the theatrical. But either way, you sit through all of that for a 7-minute fight, give or take. I cannot bitch about that enough. I'm not saying make it as long as the fight at the end of Man of Steel, but you know, this has been years in the making to see these two fight on screen in live action. Cut out half of the fight with Doomsday and put that in the fight that we bought our tickets for. Anyways, this whole sequence is shot in 4:3. It's very dark and gloomy and dramatic. The pace and the flow of the fight, while overall I think is an entertaining bout compared to everything beforehand, it's also just super slow and clunky. In my head, this thought kept coming back to how it felt like I was watching a WWE match on Raw, especially when Batman goes for that toilet tank. I'm like, okay, yeah, he's taking the chair out from beneath the ring. This is the big finisher. But the real ending to this, oh boy, Martha, this has been memed to death and back. There's no real point to get on this anymore. It's really stupid, I know. That's supposed to be their big moment where Batman connects with Superman on an emotional level, but the way it's been poked at for so many years, especially with the Lego Batman movie, I couldn't help but see that from him. I get it, grief affects everyone differently. I know I shouldn't be one to laugh, but given that Bruce is pushing into his mid-50s, he's still so touchy given all that other crap he's been through in his life at this point. You gotta find some humor in that. I mean, he has Jason Todd's suit right next to his bat suit, and he passes by without ever shedding a tear. That's a little fucked up. Before delving into the cluster crap of a finale, at least we get what is arguably probably the most entertaining set piece of the movie. Batman's warehouse fight. Oh man, it's so brutal and just cool, dude. The scene perfectly embodies the Arkham games too. There had to have been some inspiration from that. Flawless combo. The Bat is an agile, unstoppable tank in this. I'm just gushing at this point, but it's so perfect. It might be my favorite on-screen fight with Batman, ever. It's that good. Great stunt work. At least in this fight, he doesn't kill anyone too directly, right? Nah, he's fine. He'll be good in a few. Do I even need to go over the Doomsday fight? It's a mess. I've never been a fan of that. I hate Doomsday's design. There's so many issues with Lex Luthor's plan with him that I don't even know if it's worth beating the dead horse at this point. It's clear he couldn't control Doomsday, so I imagine he took it to be more like such a sore loser about not being able to influence or manipulate Superman to do what he wanted that he was just like, screw it, I'll burn the whole place to the ground. Which is more of a Joker plotline, but that's basically what Jesse Eisenberg is going for anyways, so whatever. Oh, and Wonder Woman comes in to help out. I mean, she has to. I love Batman. There wasn't a chance in hell he could really go toe-to-toe with Doomsday anyways. Lots of logistical issues with that. And Lois basically almost kills herself because she fucked up by throwing the spear away, which is dumb. It's all dumb. They put all this fancy work trying to set up the stage for the Batman and Superman fight, and then as soon as that's over, everything delves into explosions and big loud dubstep sound effects. It's nauseating. I'm afraid to go back to watch Man of Steel now. I have a feeling I'll probably end up hating that as much as I do with this. Maybe more. I just got a headache sitting through watching all this again. Terrible finale. I'm sorry, I could barely do it. And then it ends. The movie ends. Superman dies and everyone's sad. Space Jesus gave his life for humanity. And now everyone feels bad and Batman feels bad for trying to kill his best friend that he's known for not even a full day. It's over. It's finally over. Okay, no, I have to do this some justice. Alright, rewind. I'll find some positives to this. Okay, so again, not a big fan of his design. The creation of this creature is kind of comic accurate. Originally, it was made using Superman's DNA, but having it mixed between Lex and General Zod makes a little more sense for it to have an extreme hatred towards Superman. Maybe. I wish there was enough to flesh this out in some way, at least to the point where Doomsday was able to talk. Having a hulking shape with no personality as your last villain just didn't land with that emotional blow that this needed to. I think it just would have been okay if they pushed for the last fight with Lex to be in his mech suit or something. Then again, I don't think I could stomach him talking for the entirety of that fight. That would have been unbearable. Okay, no, I said positives, we're doing positives right now. I like the speed of Doomsday. I'm reaching. I think that was kind of a nice surprise because, traditionally when you see a big CG monster, you assume it's going to be really slow and lumbering, kind of like Cloverfield, but he's just as quick and nimble as Superman. And I like the change in pace and how that's conveyed. I mean, he's essentially the same as Superman, just much larger and debatably stronger. I don't really like the sound effects. A lot of this is just really makes my head hurt. It's just loud, thundering white noise to me. But I've always liked the effect whenever someone moves fast enough to break the sound barrier. That's always been cool. Alright, that's it. That's all I've got. I don't really like much of anything else in this. God. When Doomsday and Superman had that laser standoff, that just hurt my eyes so much. I think I'm just getting old. I used to really think this was the coolest shit back then. Oh no, wait, the music, come on. Alright, Hans Zimmer and Junkie XL. I think the music has been an overall positive note on this movie, but I like it a lot, especially Wonder Woman's theme. I think that was the first time we heard it. Really cool. I love the violin. They kind of overused that in Justice League, but in this I thought it was really cool. But I've always loved Superman's theme. I really think that's one of the best parts of Man of Steel 2 is just the music. I've never ever complained about the music. I remember listening to the soundtrack a lot back then. So that's still that's probably actually besides those two main fights, the warehouse fight and the Superman and Batman fight, the music it might just be the best part of this movie. I personally really enjoy it. But I think, no, that's it. That really is the last thing that I can think of as a positive for this. Wow, I'm shocked. This was not what I was expecting. This was not a great experience watching this. I could barely tolerate it. Why did I think this was a good idea? But you know what? It had to be done. I did it though. I'm just telling myself that so I feel better. But I think really diving in and paying attention to literally almost every facet that this movie tried showing me highlighted a lot more issues than I had initially tried to just brush over. I hate the old tired statement where, if you want to enjoy, just turn your brain off. And they may have been acceptable for me back when I was younger. I used to really love Transformers movies for a time. Before just a really solid or long action sequences and these kinds of movies was my bread and butter. And maybe that's why it connected with me so much then. But now I'm older, I have different tastes. It's a whole different playing field now. I don't really have the time, patience, or energy to sit through this kind of thing. I cannot imagine doing this again in theaters, having been forced to sit down and watch this again. Any pieces that I want to watch again, which would really just be the warehouse fight and Batman vs. Superman, I can watch at home on YouTube and save me a hell of a lot more time than sitting through all that other stuff, because everything else is just blank, it's gone. I'm doing the recording now and I don't even remember most of the other stuff that I haven't written. Anything I didn't write, I'm that's just white noise. It just happened, it's gone, it's bye, goodbye. Alright, but for now, again, my tastes have just changed so much to the point where I just don't have the kind of patience for something that I don't connect with as much as I used to. I will probably never see this movie again on my own. Maybe if for some reason a friend wanted to bear through this with me, if they'd never seen it, or something where I feel there might be something constructive to be gained in seeing this again, which I really doubt. Okay, let's review over this one more time. I didn't talk much about the visuals when it came to lighting and cinematography. I'm not a big fan of the overabundance in such darker color tones. I think the most colorful quotes aspect to this movie is Superman's suit, which somehow they even managed to mute that too. But I do love's too strong. I do appreciate the look of this movie within the realm of its style that it wanted to go for. For the few great action scenes that it has, I thought those were also very well shot. I didn't feel those scenes were hard to follow, not too many quick cuts. They let you see and process and kind of just enjoy the action scenes, for the grounded stuff, not so much for the giant fucking CG mess at the end. And the Batmobile chase for the Kryptonite, I think, balanced the spectacle and intensity much better than the Doomsday fight, and that carries over with the other Snyderverse DC movies too. Some people don't like it, but I do. I don't want to give it too much credit. I do find it unique with the very operatic presentation of these heroes. They've always felt much larger than life. In this movie too, they push a lot with the godlike comparisons, but in a way I could see how treating these characters with a dash of that Greek mythology angle could be pulled off. It's neat in concept, but in practice, at least this will probably be the only time we ever see these DC heroes portrayed like this, in this dark of a tone. With James Gunn taking control now, it's definitely going to be more upbeat and fun, which I am looking forward to. Hopefully they don't do that too much with Batman though, but everything in here with Batman was perfect. I loved everything with Batman in this. I think it was great. Maybe not so much with the killing. I can live without having that again, but at least we saw it. And he uses a sniper rifle for a second. I mean, it was a tractor thing, but whatever. Character writing in general, whatever. I don't think much of the dialogue was really fleshed out. It feels like everyone is trying to go for poignant one-liners, when I think that kind of writing would have been best suited for, you know, the main leads of this movie. But even then, just the dialogue for Superman does not fit for this character at all. I said it already, but a lot of his lines could have been interchangeable with Batman. I never felt the difference between Batman being the dark side of justice, willing to do whatever it means to nab a guy, versus Superman's more altruistic approach in servicing the people by sacrificing whatever it takes, even if it's his own life. Lex is laughably bad. I think I ended up disliking him more as the movie went along. I just couldn't get over how annoyingly grating his dialogue was. I get it.
God takes sides.
No,
I don't think no man in the sky
planetary
I said I get it. So for that reason, I can't give it anything more than 2 stars, and that's being generous. I was thinking about 1.5 stars, or maybe just 1, but with all the technical work that went into this, I feel that's maybe a little too harsh. It gets 1 star for Batman and Superman fight, and the other one for the warehouse fight. There's a lot that this movie's trying to achieve, and I just think it bit off more than it could handle. All those themes it tried putting into a superhero movie are interesting. I could see what they were going for, but I think that's more appropriate for a setting of characters where we don't have that kind of expectation for. Again, bringing up something like The Boys or Invincible, even where they're mostly unknowns, but they have variations in their stories where implementing those kinds of bits of social commentary better services their characters and the overarching plot. I'm sad how I ended up digging into this a lot more than I thought I would. I really hoped that this would have been more of a defense case for this movie, but I don't have anyone to blame except for my tastes, I guess. This kind of movie just doesn't do it for me anymore. But just so we don't end this on such a dour note, as it stands, I still really do enjoy the Snyder Cut of Justice League. It has a lot of bloating issues, which, you know, that's just a theme in all these superhero Snyder movies. But I appreciate that way more, and I think that had a better balance of its set piece, and especially character development between the other members of the Justice League. Cyborg especially. And lastly, you know, the tone debacle. I agree with most people, this was just needlessly dark and melodramatic for what this needed to be. But again, Justice League I think was just a massively better improvement over this, that I don't feel as bad ragging on this as much as I have been. Oh, alright, we did it. We survived. This is the longest, not by much I don't think, most ambitious video I've taken on so far. Just jump right into it. I'm sure this is all really messy and all over the place, but thank you for sticking through. Socials below, much appreciated for bearing through with me. And now I'm gonna take a nice long nap. I'm very tired, but there is an update I wanted to touch on. I will be out of town for the next couple of weeks. I don't know if I'll be able to upload, I doubt it. I'll be hanging out with some family and friends that I haven't seen in a very long time, so I'm excited for that. Maybe I'll be able to squeeze out a video while I'm there, but we'll see, no promises. I just wanted to leave something big here for now. I don't know how well this long form kind of content is going to be received, but if you're new, welcome, join the party, please. I'm down for criticisms because I'm really just winging this as I go, throwing crap at the wall and seeing what sticks at this point. I'm really happy I was able to pull this off. If you guys prefer this longer format, please let me know, and in case I don't see you,
good afternoon, good evening, and good night.